Good afternoon, spaceflight enthusiasts, and welcome to another Angry Bulletin. So I wasn't going to talk about this topic. As usual, I never seem to be able to talk about the topics I want to discuss. I was going to talk about a New Zealand company with its space plane, a space plane that recently shattered a long-standing American aviation record as part of their overall campaign to reach orbit with this plane. Very impressive stuff. Coming at you soon, but in the meantime, well, SpaceX has unloaded this massive PR campaign online in support of Lunar Starship, which I have to admit is a little frustrating to me because they haven't talked about Lunar Starship to any great degree for a long time now. I mean, really, the only major point of discussion that's been brought up from, well, Elon Musk is that the moon is a distraction, that really they should be talking about Mars. And I mean, face it, if you've watched any of these 11 test flights of Starship, when did they ever discuss the moon and Lunar Starship? The answer to that is never. All they ever talk about is Mars, 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 talking about refueling Starship to provide the necessary refueling to take 100 metric tons worth of cargo or lots of people out to the red planet. And virtually no discussion is ever made about lunar landing plans, about Artemis, about any of this. And now, all of a sudden, when acting administrator Duffy decided to pull the rug out from under SpaceX's contract, open it up to others, and you wouldn't open up this contract and offer billions of dollars for an alternative if SpaceX was in a peachy keen situation. You just wouldn't. And in spite of all of Elon Musk's tirade that he's unleashed on Administrator Duffy, this was a very good move. Regardless of whether or not SpaceX can somehow pull the fat out of the fire with Starship here in the near future, it was a good move right now if we really want to beat China to the moon. But still, SpaceX is trying very hard at this point to convince everybody that they have a solution that's going to work in time. They've listed off all of the milestones that they've accomplished and everything that Lunar Starship is going to do. But is it going to be enough? Are the things that they discussed in this PR blitz going to be enough progress to realistically put Lunar Starship in a position whereby it's going to be putting human beings on the surface of the moon, say, in 3 years or so, by 2028? Is that a realistic prospect? We're going to find out right now. All right, so topic one. What did SpaceX actually discuss? What did they have to say about the progress that's been made on Lunar Starship thus far? Have we been all wrong about this? And really, SpaceX has been making lightning fast progress on Lunar Starship and will definitely be in a position from going from where Starship is now to putting the first astronauts on the surface of the moon in over half a century. Is Starship going to be able to pull this off by, say, 2028 or maybe 2029, although that's cutting things really, really close when you consider where China is? Well, let's see what SpaceX has had to say about all of this. Okay, so to my knowledge, this is the only animation of Lunar Starship that I've seen, at least for quite some time, from SpaceX, to go together with the only update that we've seen about Lunar Starship, at least for the last couple of years. But they provided a lot of detail on completed milestones. This includes lunar environmental control and life support and thermal control system demonstrations using a full-scale cabin module inhabited by multiple people to test the capability to inject oxygen and nitrogen into the cabin environment and accurately manage air distribution and sanitation, along with humidity and thermal control. The test series also measured the acoustic environments inside the cabin. Next is docking adapter qualification of the docking system that will link Starship and Orion in space, an androgynous SpaceX docking system capable capable of serving as the active system or passive system and based on the flight-proven Dragon 2 active docking system. Next up is the landing leg drop test of a full-scale article at Flight Energies onto simulated lunar regolith to verify system performance and to study foot-to-regolith interaction. Later on, I'm going to tell you as to why, although that's a good thing, it's not nearly enough progress if you're really planning on putting humans on the surface of the moon anytime soon. Let's continue. Raptor lunar landing throttle test demonstrating a representative thrust profile that would allow Starship to land on the lunar surface. So as near as I can tell, they're planning to use full-scale Raptors to land on the moon. Micrometeoroid and orbital debris testing of shielding, insulation, and window panels, analyzing different material stack-ups that will be used to protect Starship from impact hazards and harsh thermal conditions, landing software, sensor, and radar demonstrations testing navigation and sensing hardware and software that will be used by Starship to locate and safely descend to a precise landing site on the moon, software architecture review to define the schematic of major vehicle control processes, what physical computers they will run on, and software functions for critical systems like fault detection, caution, and warning alerts and command and telemetry control. Raptor cold start demonstrations using both sea level and vacuum optimized Raptor engines that are pre-chilled prior to startup to simulate the thermal conditions experienced after an extended time in space. Integrated Lunar Mission Operations Plan Review covering how SpaceX and NASA will conduct integrated operations, develop flight rules and crew procedures, and the high-level mission operation plan. Depot power module demonstration, testing prototype, electrical power generation and distribution systems planned to be used on the propellant depot variant of Starship. Now keep in mind, it's another important thing about this progress. The propellant depot, well, they may be testing some systems for it, but as near as I can tell, and they would have announced this if they had done this, there is no PDR, no preliminary design review completed for the propellant depot, which is absolutely critical to getting Lunar Starship to the moon in the first place. Then you have ground segment and radio frequency communications demonstration, testing the capability to send and receive RF communications between a flight equivalent ground station and a flight equivalent vehicle RF system, an airlock and elevator demonstration, which was conducted in concert with Axiom to utilize flight representative pressurized EVA suits. By the way, Axiom are the folks who are designing the new lunar landing suit to practice full operation of the crew elevator, which will be used to transfer crew and cargo between Starship and the lunar surface. Then you have a medical system demonstration covering the crew medical system on Starship and the telemedicine capability between the ground and crew. That's a very good feature. Then hardware in the loop testbed activation for the propellant transfer flight test, which uses a testbed for flight representative hardware to run simulations for the upcoming propellant transfer flight tests. All of this very impressive, and well, that's lots and lots and lots of milestones, but really it's almost throwing every tiny milestone at the wall, basically to see what sticks without mentioning the extremely key milestones that have yet to be accomplished. And before we head over to that particular discussion, we should also talk about what SpaceX has said about Jim Bridenstine, who made some very public comments about how Artemis's current progress, especially when it comes to Lunar Starship, is not going to allow NASA to beat China in the current race to the moon. And what they did, essentially, they made a brief mention saying that they were happy and grateful that Mr. Bridenstine had spearheaded Artemis to begin with, but then threw him under the bus when it comes to his motivation, saying that he's a lobbyist for an Artemis organization, an Artemis-related organization called the Artemis Group that represents a host of aerospace companies who are lobbying for representation in the upcoming moon mission, of course saying that he's therefore biased. And I would say that's probably true, but that doesn't mean that he's wrong about the whole situation. He absolutely isn't. There are significant reasons to be very concerned about SpaceX's progress, even according to their own admissions. We'll get to that in just a moment. Okay, so that's the SpaceX propaganda on the topic, but what is the actual truth? Well, first of all, I don't doubt that they've done all of these things, that these milestones have been accomplished. But really, I don't know if this was unwittingly or not, all SpaceX did is really put a spotlight on all the milestones that still remain, given the progress that has been made, and given the fact that Starship still doesn't have a preliminary design review. Lunar Starship doesn't have a PDR. The refueling depot that they're going to need to get an HLS, a Starship HLS, out to the moon, that doesn't have a preliminary design review completed. None of this has a PDR completed. And then it usually takes at least 2 years after a PDR to get a critical design review completed. And by the way, SpaceX is no exception to this. They've had to do exactly the same thing when it comes to, say, Crew Dragon and the Commercial Crew Project. So when it comes down to it, what is it that SpaceX really still has to accomplish in spite of what they've had to say? Okay, first of all, SpaceX decided to drag all of the litigious nonsense that took place back in 2021. And when I'm talking about nonsense, I'm talking mostly about Jeff Bezos's refusal to accept Lunar Starship being granted the HLS contract. They drug all of that out and presented the GAO response to these protests, saying that there were very good reasons that Starship was selected, mostly because the Blue Origin and Dynetic solutions had some significant problems as far as their mechanical and engineering solutions were concerned. Now, the Dynetic solution I'd really like to point out, because they said one of the problems that existed at the time is that given the mass of the Dynetics lander and its propulsion systems as presented, this lander, the Alpaca, would not actually be able to lift off from the moon and successfully rendezvous with Orion. That's actually true, and the reason that happened is because Dynetics was trying to design a lander that would be serviceable by 2024, therefore utilizing a lot of heavy off-the-shelf components, making their lander a lot heavier than they want it to be. These problems were swiftly resolved, by the way, and the updated Dynetics Alpaca didn't have any of these sorts of issues. But what the GAO report failed to mention, and it's simply because they were given the wrong information, is that SpaceX had the same problems. The Raptor engines of the time, the Raptor 1 and Raptor 2, keep in mind, Raptor 3 wasn't even on the drawing boards in those days, were also incapable of lifting the necessary payload to make HLS work. Granted, taking 100 tons to the moon wasn't necessary, but taking 100 tons to orbit absolutely was. You can't get Starship to the moon unless you're able to consistently transfer 100 metric tons worth of fuel to orbit over and over again 10 times or so in order to completely refuel Starship. And Starship, as it was designed during the time of the GAO protest, was incapable of doing this. And we've seen this from the last 11 tests. Only the Block 3 Starship, after lots of redesigns and improvements to the Raptor engines, are going to be capable of doing that. So really, Starship had a lot of the same mechanical and engineering issues that Alpaca did. The difference is that Elon misrepresented the capabilities of Starship and Raptor at the time. In addition to that, they also said this: Mr. Bridenstine's recent musings promoting a new landing system going so far as to invoke the Defense Production Act are being misreported as though they were the unbiased thoughts of a former NASA administrator. They are not. To be clear, he is a paid lobbyist. He is representing his client's interests, and his comments should be seen for what they are: a paid lobbyist effort to secure billions more in government funding for his clients who are already years late and billions of dollars over budget. I'll tell you something, I am not happy with the way SpaceX is throwing Jim Bridenstine under the bus. He is one of the best administrators that NASA has had in recent memory. But all that having been said, what about the upcoming milestones? Well, first of all, let's go ahead and talk about the crew cabin. Now, they've talked about life support system tests that they've undertaken, but they've only started, this is according to their website, fabricating a flight article Starship HLS cabin that will include functional avionics and power systems, crew systems and mechanisms, environmental control and life support systems, cabin and crew communication systems, and a cabin thermal control system. This flight-capable cabin will enable engineers to demonstrate high design maturity of the various systems required to support a human being landing on the moon, enable integrated system-level hardware testing, and provide a highly realistic training experience for future lunar explorers. Okay, if you've only just started fabricating the crew cabin and the life support systems that go with it, the whole notion that that thing is going to be fully serviceable and capable of landing astronauts on the surface of the moon in 3 to 4 years is completely delusional. That has never been done before, not even by SpaceX and Crew Dragon, with the crew cabin that they designed for that spacecraft, which, by the way, is orders of magnitude simpler than a lunar lander crew cabin. And this points out one of the most significant milestones that SpaceX is not close to accomplishing yet, and they don't have a lot of time to get it done. In addition to that, we need to talk about that landing leg demonstration. Now, at this point, a lunar lander should be simulating a landing on the moon with simulated lunar gravity. China has already done that. Just a few weeks ago, China demonstrated their lunar lander prototype attempting to land, or doing a simulated landing rather, on the moon utilizing lunar gravity. And by the way you do that is hold the lander up a bit. In other words, reduce the effect of gravity on the test article, and then fire up your engines and simulate a landing. And this is the same way, not exactly the same. They actually used low-powered jet engines to negate some of the Earth's gravity, but this is what Apollo was using to simulate lunar landings years prior to 1969. And according to Neil Armstrong, without these types of simulations, they definitely would have crashed on the moon. And SpaceX hasn't even started doing this with Lunar Starship. Why? Because they don't have a test article that has passed its PDR yet. So the next major flight milestones, according to SpaceX, tied specifically to HLS will be a long-duration flight test and the in-space propellant transfer flight test. The exact timing will be driven by how upcoming flight tests debuting the new Starship version 3 or Block 3 architecture progresses. But both of these tests are targeted to take place in 2026. But again, here's part of the problem, and they're admitting this. Only Starship version 3 was capable of getting started with this process. All of the previous versions of Starship, in other words, the versions that were proposed in the first place, were incapable of carrying the necessary payload to orbit just to refuel Starship, let alone attempt a lunar landing. On-orbit refilling enables Starship to complete the Artemis lunar mission architecture and carry up to 100 tons directly to the lunar surface, providing the capability ability to carry rovers, habitats, and other payloads needed to establish a permanent and sustainable presence on the moon. By the way, I completely agree with this. I think that Starship, Lunar Starship, or whatever version of Starship will be carrying huge amounts of cargo to the moon and establishing a robust presence there. But in terms of a quick to design, quick to complete lunar lander designed to scout out the surface of the moon, I mean, I haven't even talked about the tall, top-heavy characteristics of this lander and how difficult that's going to be to land not just on a landing pad, but on uneven lunar regolith at the lunar South Pole, where the terrain is especially dangerous. SpaceX took a good shot at doing their PR blitz here and made their case, but I'm sorry, I'm not convinced, and I'm pretty sure that nobody at NASA is either. Really, when it comes down to it, the only people who are convinced are the ones working at SpaceX and SpaceX fanboys. I can't imagine anybody else who accepts this design, this spacecraft, as being something that can realistically put humans on the moon in the next 3 years. So yeah, as we can see, the progress that SpaceX is talking about, although it sounds great on paper, it just isn't enough. Not if we're expecting to land human beings on the surface of the moon in the next 2.5 to 3 years. It's just not enough progress. There are many things that need to be done in order to get Starship from where it is now to where it can even attempt an unmanned landing on the moon. By way of comparison, as you saw in the video, China is already testing their lunar lander prototype in terms of lunar landing scenarios under simulated lunar gravity. SpaceX should definitely be doing that with Starship if it's anywhere close to being a mature system, and yet they're not. And the reason for that is they don't have a preliminary design review completed about this. They still can't say for certain if this is the final product because they don't have a Starship, at least not yet, that's capable of delivering 100 metric tons to orbit. And even though you don't have to deliver 100 metric tons to the moon, you do have to deliver 100 metric tons to orbit if you're going to refuel Lunar Starship in a realistic period of time. And by the way, all this BS about how if you take a smaller amount of payload out to the moon, you don't have to refuel Starship as much, it will require fewer missions, etc., that's utter nonsense. If you try to fly Lunar Starship to the moon on half-empty fuel tanks, you're going to have so much propellant slosh in those half-empty tanks right from the beginning that holding this thing on course is going to be an incredibly difficult undertaking. There's no point in adding that much more difficulty in trying to get Starship out to the moon, let alone trying to land it on half-empty fuel tanks. So what really is the answer? Well, SpaceX was obligated actually by October 29th to provide an accelerated schedule for their HLS solution to tell NASA, show NASA how they're going to be able to get things done in time. And frankly, I was a little disappointed. I would have hoped instead that SpaceX had presented a third stage solution. Take the refueling out of the equation and put a mini Starship in the fairing of the Starship upper stage, something capable of carrying maybe 10 tons to the moon, which is still a lot, way more than Apollo was able to, and utilizing the rest of that payload for fuel to get the HLS out to lunar orbit, down to the surface of the moon, and then back to Orion. I think that is a much better scenario, at least in the short run, while we're still developing this low Earth orbit refueling architecture. A third stage solution to just get a couple astronauts, a few tons of cargo down to the moon to begin with, again, way more than Apollo was able to, would still be a viable solution for Artemis. But will they? It doesn't look like that's in their planning right now. And again, that's understandable because in order to make all of that work, you would have to have an expendable Starship. You'd have to expend the entire rocket in order to get it into an aggressive enough trajectory towards the moon to whereby that third stage would actually be able to make it. So I'm very glad that NASA has come to their senses. I'm extra glad that they dumped that whole plan of getting rid of SLS and Orion. It's just insane, that notion. That's the only area of this mission where NASA has a substantial lead on China, is the capability of delivering a human-rated spacecraft to orbit. NASA has already demonstrated that they can do that. They made that demonstration years ago. China doesn't have that capability at all yet. Would have been insane to dump that capability at the 11th hour in favor of Starship somehow being able to carry out the entire mission. So thank God NASA has woken up to all of that, but have they woken up in time? Well, we'll just have to see, but I think it's kind of unlikely. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and also please consider supporting this channel on Patreon. All the details are in the description if you'd like to get access to these videos early or access to some exclusive content and my Discord server. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, stay angry about space.